Your husband got my wife pregnant. Pay me compensation.
On the day of a major life event, our wedding, this outrageous statement came from my brother David.
It was a mistake we made out of a whim. Please, I'm begging you, pay the compensation.
David's wife, Mary, broke down crying. We were all stunned by the sudden turn of events, but soon laughter began to bubble up among us. My name is Ashley, and I'm a 32-year-old office worker. I wasn't entirely devoted to my career until I was 29, but I had no other connections, so it was all about work. However, 3 years ago, I started dating John, a guy I met through a friend.
Let's get married.
I had never particularly thought about marriage, but when John suddenly proposed, I immediately nodded yes. Life really is unpredictable. Now that we're getting married, I decided to first break the news to our parents. We visited John's parents first. Both of his parents seemed very kind, and I felt we could get along well. Our visit to John's house went smoothly. Next is my family's turn. That's when my worries began. My father is just an average salaryman, and my mother is a typical housewife. They are just an ordinary couple with no particularly difficult personalities. Too ordinary, perhaps. But the ordinary parents aren't the problem. The issue is my not-so-ordinary brother. My brother David, who is 3 years older than me, got married 5 years ago. He and his wife, Mary, who is the same age as him, don't have any children. That's their personal matter, and I don't really think much about it. Our parents also believe that life is a gift, so they aren't the type to rush anyone for grandchildren.
Ashley, you're not married, so these worries aren't something you'd understand. I'm a bit jealous.
However, it seems Mary's family is quite pushy, and whenever I see them, they often make snide remarks. Mary must have it tough. I mentioned this to a friend.
Isn't that just a snide remark about you not being married?
My friend's words surprised me. Really? Do you think so? That's probably overthinking it. I wouldn't want to become too cynical about these things. I just laughed it off. My relationship with Mary is neutral. We're neither particularly close nor distant. But things aren't the same with my brother. Actually, David has always been quite a handful. In a word, David always needed to be better than me.
You're really bad at studying. You're not attractive either. Even our parents don't love you.
I've been on the receiving end of his insults since we were kids.
I got a perfect score today. Plus, a cute girl confessed her feelings to me at school. Jealous, right? I bet our parents think I'm the better kid too.
David always tried to one-up me. But I know the truth. The tests in which he has good scores are usually from his second attempts at it, or they are simpler questions made for the lower grades. He never shows the real tests that matter, throwing them in the trash instead. And those stories about getting confessions are probably just fabrications. As for our parents' love, there's no truth to that at all. From what I can see, our parents treat us both very equally. In a way, David is a pitiful person. That's why I don't let it get to me. Instead, I look at David with a bit of disdain and maintain a reasonable distance in our sibling relationship. David, who is 3 years older than me, landed a job at a company that's borderline exploitative like a sweatshop. His salary hardly ever increases, and his bonuses are so meager they sometimes don't come at all. It's a wage tough enough for someone living alone, so he's still living at our parents' home. On the other hand, the company I joined isn't a giant corporation, but it's fairly sizable. I get annual raises, and the bonuses are reliable. It's not exactly a perfect company, but it's a decent place to work at. Maybe that wounded David's pride because his snide remarks escalated.
No matter how much makeup you put on, someone like you just ends up looking worse.
David even threw away all my makeup once.
Must be nice to have such a good salary. Hand over some cash to me.
He even took money from my wallet right in front of me. That, of course, led to a huge fight. Fed up with such a life, I moved out early to live on my own. It's been 10 years since then. I only visit home once a year. Things got even more complicated when Mary started living there 5 years ago. Despite it being a crucial matter like a marriage introduction, the thought of visiting the family home is too painful. I keep saying this, but David and his wife are really quite peculiar people. I keep stressing this to my fiancé, John.
It'll be fine. David aside, your parents are decent, right? I'm just going to thank and greet them for letting me meet you, Ashley. It won't be weird.
He says this with a laugh, but I was filled with nothing but anxiety. And finally, we arrived at my family home.
Well, you've come at last.
My mother greeted us warmly.
Good to see you. Good to see you.
My father kept repeating. Perhaps it's a thing fathers with daughters do when the daughter brings a man over, but his smile was strained. Having a daughter in her 30s finally getting married is certainly a joyous occasion, yet it can still bring about a mix of complex emotions for a father. Seeing my father like this, I couldn't help but give a wry smile. After introducing John, we talked about the wedding plans, future arrangements, and then made some light conversation, passing the time pleasantly. But then, the moment finally came.
Oh, the spinster sister returns.
David arrived home. His first comment was a masterful sneer. David, aren't you supposed to be at work? John and I took a day off to visit my parents, but it's a weekday. David is supposed to be working. Actually, we timed our visit to avoid him and Mary. They are living at my parents' house because they can't afford their own place. That's why we planned our visit this way, to avoid David and Mary. Yet, here he is coming home in the middle of the day. When I asked with a puzzled look, David just grinned.
How could I not be here when my dear little sister's fiancé is visiting?
I really didn't need you here, though. I wanted to say that, but held back, creating an awkward silence. Sensing this, John broke the ice with a cheerful greeting.
Nice to meet you, David.
It was a genuinely refreshing greeting. What a great man he is. John is so wonderful for reading the room like that. I praised John silently in my heart. David's face seemed a bit tense. For David, who is so proud, John is probably a really difficult guy to get along with. David appeared a bit overwhelmed by John's constant smiling.
I'm home.
Then we heard a voice from the entrance and the sound of someone coming home.
Hi, is Ashley here?
And there was Mary popping her head in. Since David's salary alone isn't enough, she works too. Mary is home too? What about her job? When David and Mary unexpectedly came home, my parents and I were taken aback. David plopped down next to me. And oddly enough, Mary chose to sit next to John. Why did she sit right next to John? What's with that look? I asked David, who had a dark, unseemly grin, quite the opposite of the charming and cheerful John.
Wow, I can't believe someone actually agreed to marry someone like you.
The second snide remark flew out. What?
Hey, what's your name?
I'm John.
Right, John. You know, you can still back out of this marriage.
David blurted out something unbelievable to John. Hey, David.
As you can see, Ashley is not much to look at, and you definitely regret marrying her later. She's truly a hopeless case, a real piece of work.
Hey. Even as I tried to stop him, David didn't let up.
Well, better call off the marriage before you regret it.
It was when I tried to make him stop in whatever way I could.
It's okay. Ashley is a wonderful woman. I have to make sure she doesn't give up on me actually.
Then John replied with a refreshing, sincere smile, devoid of any sarcasm. What an amazing person. My anger at David was quickly dispelled by John. As this was happening, Mary, who was watching, started to speak.
John, right? You're so kind. Where do you work?
Oh, well, I work at Rainbow Corporation.
Oh, that's a decent company, isn't it? So you must be earning a good salary?
Well, I guess it's pretty average.
Mary, without any regard for me, boldly started prying into personal matters. David is one thing, but Mary is something else. That's not something you ask someone you just met. Hey, Mary.
What, Ashley? This is important for marriage, isn't it? I'm just making sure my dear sister-in-law doesn't end up with some weird guy. I'm asking so your parents don't have to worry.
That's none of your business. Such matters have already been discussed. Of course, I told my parents about him before they met. I wanted to say that, but couldn't in front of him. I just kept a strained face. Meanwhile, Mary wrapped her arm around John's and leaned on him. Hey, Mary.
What? I'm just getting along with my future brother-in-law. Don't be annoying.
No, that's too much, right? Hey, David. I thought David would agree this was out of line, but then I saw him cracking open a beer in the middle of the day. What are you doing?
What do you mean? I'm toasting to your pitiful marriage.
What does that even mean? It was complete chaos. My parents just hovered anxiously, unable to handle the assertive David and Mary. David was drunk, and Mary was making advances on John. John tried to gently push her away, but Mary clung even more persistently. I tried to pull her away. What on earth is this? I'm really sorry about my family.
No, it's okay. They're a lot more than I had expected. It must have been tough for you, Ashley.
As we were leaving, I apologized to John, who gave me a comforting pat on the head with a wry smile. Even in such moments, John was a gentleman. Despite the chaos at my family home, once that was over, there was no need to meet David and Mary anymore, and everything went smoothly. And then finally, the day of the wedding arrived. Oh, I'm so nervous. I was visibly tense in the bride's dressing room.
Are you okay, Ashley?
Seeing how pale and serious I looked, my mother called John over. John gently held my hand and encouraged me. He really is too good for me. It was when I was finally gathering up my courage.
Here I am. The star has arrived.
With a loud bang, the door swung open and a storm ensued. This is going to get messy. I have a bad feeling about this. David's dramatic entrance made my head spin.
David, please, it's not the time and place.
My mother tried to calm him down, but David was weirdly confrontational.
Shut up. Mom, stay out of this. I have something to say to this guy.
When I followed David's pointing finger, it was John, my husband-to-be.
What? Me?
John looked bewildered. David turned to me and said,
The man you're marrying today, John, got Mary pregnant.
What?
The gynecologist confirmed the pregnancy. It's at a time I don't remember being responsible for. So, my wife Mary has been unfaithful.
Unfaithful aside, why would it be John?
Mary told me so.
What? I couldn't keep up with what was happening. Confused, I looked back and forth between Mary and John.
No, no. I have no idea what you're talking about.
John hurriedly denied it, but at that moment, Mary, who had been quiet behind David, collapsed to the floor and started crying.
I'm sorry, John. I spilled the beans about our relationship.
What?
I'm sorry, David. It was just a moment of folly.
Mary then apologized to David, bursting into tears and crying out loud.
How dare you destroy our marriage? You'll pay for this.
David then tried to grab John, enraged. My father and other relatives desperately held him back. For a while, only David's heavy breathing and Mary's sobbing could be heard in the room. John and I looked at each other, dumbfounded, and then burst out laughing. I was the first to start laughing. Caught by the humor of the moment, John couldn't hold back either and joined in. Once we started, we couldn't stop. Despite the risk of ruining my makeup with tears, I laughed so hard that those around us just stared in amazement.
What's so funny?
David asked irritably. Wow, did you hear that, John?
Yeah, Ashley, I know.
With tears still in our eyes, we looked at each other and burst out laughing again.
How can you laugh in this situation? Just pay the compensation quickly.
To our surprise, it was Mary who snapped at us. The very idea of her demanding money was so absurd that it made me double over with laughter. Oh my God, I couldn't help but laugh. You know that it's impossible for you and John to have a child, right?
What?
As I gently dabbed my tears with a handkerchief, Mary looked puzzled. I smiled sweetly and repeated, We can't have children.
What? What do you mean? What are you talking about?
Mary was clearly shaken, her facade completely falling apart. After a moment of hesitation and a glance at John, who nodded affirmatively, I continued while looking back at David and Mary. John has fertility issues, making natural conception virtually impossible for us.
What?
David exclaimed in shock. It's confirmed by medical tests. I can even prepare the medical reports if you want.
That's a lie. I am actually pregnant.
That's when a flustered Mary spoke up. That means, if you really are pregnant, then John is definitely not the father. If you want a child with him, we'd need to go through various treatments like injections and IVF. We would need to undergo medical procedures.
What?
Mary's face grew paler by the second. Glancing at David, she saw his furious expression.
Hey Ashley, what you're saying, is it true?
It's true.
John himself responded to David's inquiry.
If you still doubt it, David, you can choose the hospital and check the results yourself.
Well, I don't think we need to go that far.
David stumbled over his words, visibly thrown off by John's assertive response. Immediately, David glared fiercely at Mary.
No.
Hey Mary, what's this all about? You said you cheated with John, right?
Yes, he reached out to me and pressured me. I was frightened, so I couldn't refuse. But it was just something stupid done out of a whim. I only love you, David.
But they're saying it's impossible to get pregnant with John. Who the heck did you cheat with then?
That was just John's lie.
What a ridiculous statement. I was dumbfounded by Mary's absurd claim. Mary, from the first day you met John until today, we've been together almost every day preparing for the wedding and our future life. Do you think there was any time to cheat?
You said you frequently met John during the day or on weekends and had an affair, right?
Yes, Ashley, don't lie.
No, Mary. That's quite a stretch, isn't it? She seems desperate to pin this on John.
All right, both of you, let's calm down.
Surprisingly, it was my father who interjected. His ordinary tone almost made the whole situation feel anticlimactic. However, right after that, my usually unremarkable father made an extraordinary remark.
Since both spouses have been cheating, let's just call it even.
Is that even how you use that phrase? What does that mean? What? Stunned by my father's words, I let out a confused sound after a pause.
What?
What?
Wait, Dad, what are you saying?
Ashley, you may have not known, but your mother and I, who live together, were aware.
Wait, what? Confused, I could barely keep up, but my father just smiled at me in his usual way.
Hey, Dad, stop talking nonsense.
What's nonsense about it? It's the truth, right?
My father calmly responded to a frantic David. When it gets to this point, normal is actually scary.
What do you mean?
When Mary asked, my mother, still smiling, answered,
Well, you see, David has been seeing another woman. He often skips work to meet her, and they even rendezvous in front of our house. We couldn't possibly not notice.
What?
Mary couldn't help but exclaim.
Mary, meeting men at the nearby station isn't wise either. We've got loads of reports from the neighbors seeing you.
What?
Now it was David's turn to shout. According to my parents, both David and Mary had been frequently spotted by neighbors meeting with strangers, linking arms, and being affectionate. Not just by my parents, but practically everyone in the neighborhood had seen them, and the rumors had reached my parents' ears. In other words, both David and Mary had been cheating.
Hey, Mary, what are you doing cheating on me?
Wait, like you haven't been cheating too.
At least I didn't get the other woman pregnant.
Well, I didn't plan to get pregnant either.
What are you being so defiant for? That's it. I want a divorce. Pay me compensation.
What? I should be the one saying that to you. You pay me.
The scene was a complete quagmire. Just when I thought it couldn't be resolved, my father snapped his fingers. Immediately after, my uncle and cousin arrived, grabbed David and Mary by the arms, and dragged them out of the room. Even as they were being pulled away, David and Mary continued to hurl insults at each other.
It's your fault.
No, it's your fault.
They made a very unseemly exit. After leaving the waiting room, David and Mary's voices faded away as they disappeared into the distance. Later, I heard that my uncle and cousins gave them a firm chat and sent them packing. The waiting room felt eerily silent. I'm sorry. Feeling like I had just survived a storm, I apologized to John, my soon-to-be husband. Does this make you regret marrying into my family? That was my biggest fear. I was prepared for the possibility that the marriage could be called off. But then I was suddenly enveloped in warmth. John had embraced me.
It's okay. I love you, Ashley, no matter what, and I will protect you for a lifetime.
The moment he said that, tears suddenly started to overflow. Afterward, it was tough to redo my makeup, but a professional fixed it beautifully. Then I had the happiest wedding as the world's happiest bride. As for David and Mary, as expected, they ended up getting divorced. They just kept hurling insults at each other and never had a proper conversation, eventually leading to court. It's impressive how they could still blame each other so vehemently despite both being unfaithful. However, it seems they settled somehow by having their parents hire lawyers. In the end, they called it even, and neither paid any compensation. Turns out the child Mary was carrying wasn't David's, so no child support was involved. The father of the child was apparently Mary's boss at work, who was married, and that caused a big stir too. After being abandoned by her secret partner, Mary was practically dragged back to her parents' home. My parents sighed over how she was wailing and making a scene. As for David, the woman he was seeing was also married, and he was being sued for compensation by her. But David, having no savings, pleaded with our parents, who kicked him out, saying he got what he deserved. I happened to witness that scene where my normally calm parents finally lost their temper.
Being a disgraceful brother to Ashley, playing around forever and never working. You are no longer my son. Get out now.
David was practically kicked out by my father in a fit of anger. What happened to David after that? I don't know. He probably got fired for skipping work to meet his mistress. I wonder how he's going to survive, but frankly, I don't care. Whatever has happened, I will never forgive him for insulting John on our wedding day. I might be okay, but when it comes to John, it's not okay at all. I'm completely smitten with John. John remains as refreshing and kind as ever. A new happiness is coming to our happy home,
I'm looking forward to meeting them.
John said, stroking my belly. Where life is growing. Fertility treatments were tough, but fortunately I got pregnant. Things might get more challenging from here, but I'm sure it will be fine. With my gentle and wonderful John and our beloved child, I have a feeling we will build a perfectly happy family.